So I just want to welcome all of you who are joining us just now. As you just heard, this session is being recorded, so I just want to remind you of that, and that if you're not comfortable using the chat, just send me a private message with a question and I will let the speaker know. So for this next presentation, I'm really pleased to introduce Dr. Kendra Rieger and Dr. Marlyn Bennet, whose presentation is titled A Debwewin Journey Through Digital Storytelling. So it's a recorded session, and Dr. Rieger will explain this and describe why this is. But Kendra Rieger is an assistant professor in the School of Nursing at Trinity Western University, and Marlyn Bennet is a member of the Sandy Bay Ojibwe First Nation in Manitoba and comes from a family brimming with many artistic talents, which I love. So just a reminder, please keep yourself muted during the presentation, and as time permits, we'll have a Q&A at the end. And at that point, you can unmute yourself to ask a question. So I will pass it over to Kendra for the presentation. Masi Cho and welcome.
Thanks so much, Lyana. It's such an honor to be here today and share our work with you. And thank you so much, Amanda and your colleagues. It was just such a wonderful overview and such a meaningful overview of digital storytelling. And so feels really good to be sharing this after what you shared. And the reason we recorded it is because Dr. Marlyn Bennet isn't able to be with us here today. She was called up to be in a northern community in Manitoba, and they have very poor Wi-Fi. So, and we really wanted to present this together because this has really been a collaborative process together. And so, yeah, please, but yeah, we're happy to answer questions after the video presentation. And I think, Aaliyah, are you going to start the video?
I am.
Okay.
All right. Can everyone see that on the screen?
Experiences of breast cancer using digital.
Just want to check and make sure everyone can see that. Sorry, perfect, okay.
Storytelling. And to share with you what we learned about this project. So Dr. Marlyn Bennet and I will be sharing with you today. And our work was funded by the Center for Healthcare Innovation. And our research team also includes Dr. Donna Martin and Dr. Tom Hack. So Marlyn and I actually met when we were both PhD students at the University of Manitoba. She was in the Faculty of Social Work and I was in the School of Nursing. We conducted this project actually about 3 years after we met, when we were both new assistant professors at the University of Manitoba. Marlyn, can you introduce yourself?
Hi there, I'm Dr. Marlyn Bennet, and I am with the Faculty of Social Work as an assistant professor. I am also the director of the Master of Social Work based in Indigenous Knowledges program, and I'm very happy to be here presenting with Dr. Rieger on the project that we were involved in.
And yeah, I'm really pleased to be here as well, presenting with Marlyn. And I'm now an assistant professor in the Trinity Western University School of Nursing here in BC. And I'm so grateful to live, work, and play on the traditional unceded territories of the Squamish people. So today we're going to be presenting about a Debwewin journey through digital storytelling. I really think this study is a great example of how arts-based approaches can be used to engage participants in a culturally relevant way, and also to use to understand diverse health experiences of First Nations women to promote health equity. In our presentation today, we would like to share a little bit of the background of the project with you, and then share a bit about digital storytelling, and then talk about phase 1 of our study, where we used a digital storytelling workshop to engage with First Nations women with experiences of breast cancer. And then talk about our phase 2 of our study, and also some of the other projects that Marlyn and I have been involved in since this initial project. So a bit of that background to our study. In Manitoba, breast cancer mortality has increased for First Nations women, while it has decreased for all other women. And as well, First Nations women are significantly more likely to be diagnosed with advanced breast cancer. Findings announced by the First Nations Health and Social Secretariat of Manitoba show that life expectancy for all First Nations women and girls is 72 years, and that this is lower than all other Manitobans by 11 years. So clearly, Western approaches to Indigenous research and healthcare practices have had limited effectiveness on health outcomes. When research is conducted from a Western approach alone, the findings and resulting policies ignore health practices of Indigenous peoples and often fail to align with their healthcare priorities. We believe there's a need to employ Indigenous research approaches to identify the intersecting reasons behind this health disparity and also to integrate Indigenous knowledges into our healthcare services. Storytelling has long been used by Indigenous communities to share knowledge and is increasingly being used as a research approach by Indigenous peoples and settlers. And as a form of arts-based inquiry, storytelling can open up alternative avenues for expressing life's experiences. The arts can engage people emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally, and provide a container for holistic knowledge, which is congruent with Indigenous values. Digital storytelling specifically is an arts-based approach in which participants choose a personal story that they want to share and create a 3 to 5 minute video using various multimedia material to share that personal story. As our workshop was a patient engagement project, we don't have ethical permission to share their stories with you, but we'd like to give you an idea of what a digital story might look like in a research project. And we'd like to share a video created by Marlyn in a different research project. And this video is called "My Mother's Love Was in a Bowl of Porridge."
I'm the third oldest of 6 children born to my mother, Virginia. When I was 12 years old, my mother passed away from leukemia. She was only 32 years old. My brother and sisters and I grew up in care despite the fact that we came from a large extended family. I often say that I know my mother better in death than when she was alive. As a child, I was often hurt and confused about my mother's choices. I didn't understand why we were so poor. I didn't understand why she was not always affectionate like the mothers of my friends. I did not know then that my mother was a residential school survivor because she never talked about it. Had I known, I might have understood her better. I might have understood why alcohol seemed so much more important to her than us. I might have been more forgiving. I might have been more patient. It wasn't until years later, when I was older and had learned more of the history of residential schools, that I realized alcohol was my mother's way of coping with untold pain and recollections born from her residential school experiences. There are many memories about my mother that I hold dear in my heart. One in particular stands out. Even though my mother struggled with alcohol, I never doubted her love for us. On the mornings when she was able, she would get up early to make us breakfast, and she always made porridge. On those days that she made porridge for breakfast, I would go off to school feeling more satisfied and happier than I had ever felt. It always made me feel that everything would be okay and that the world was right because my mom truly loved us. It dawned on me years later that the simple act of making porridge was my mother's way of showing us that she cared for us and that she loved us. I wish I had the chance to tell my mom that I understand now why she struggled so, that I forgive her, that I miss her, and that I love her too. I've been told that I was fortunate to have grown up in foster care, as if that somehow made me into the person that I am today. It has to a certain extent, but the real credit is simply due to the enduring strength of my mom's love. My mom's love was cooked into every bowl of porridge served. This small but significant and loving gesture has sustained me, my sisters, and my brother to this very day.
So Marlyn created this story, this beautiful story, in a different research project, but I think it really shows how deeply meaningful these stories are. And in a research study, participants often create a story like this in a 2 to 3 day workshop, and it includes story circles, and also often meet with a researcher after the digital storytelling workshop to talk about the meaning of the story to them. And the stories can also be used to share the study findings in a very engaging and evocative way with patients, healthcare providers, policymakers, and academics. Our research team was interested in conducting a research study to explore First Nations women's experiences of breast cancer using digital storytelling to inform healthcare services. And we viewed this project as occurring in 2 phases. In phase 1, we wanted to engage with First Nations women to assess the feasibility and meaningfulness and appropriateness of using digital storytelling in a future study. Based on this work, in phase 2, we would then co-create and implement the larger research studies. For the first phase, we applied for a patient engagement grant that allowed us to develop the study plans along First Nations women who had experienced breast cancer. And our goal in this initial part was to ensure that our future study is relevant, acceptable, and of high quality. To this end, the objectives of our digital storytelling workshop were to explore First Nations women's meanings of breast cancer, to identify factors shaping their healthcare experiences, to identify what their research priorities were, and to assess if the research design and proposed methods were culturally safe, feasible, and acceptable to the women. A two-eyed seeing perspective and a framework for research engagement guided our work. A two-eyed seeing perspective values both Indigenous and Western perspectives for building upon existing knowledge. And a patient engagement framework, we use the SCORE patient engagement framework. We use patient engagement in research as existing on a continuum all the way from consultation to being fully patient and public directed. And based on this framework, we aim to engage in a collaborative level of engagement with our patient partners. The goal of the collaborative level of engagement is to actively partner with patient partners through each phase of the research cycle activity, which is depicted in this diagram. In the first phase of our work, we really hoped that our engagement with our patient partners in the digital storytelling workshop would involve them in the preparation stage for our future study and enable us to gather new research ideas based on their needs and priorities. The medicine wheel teachings also provided a guide for our workshop and provided especially a culturally relevant conceptual framework. So there's some variation in the representation and teachings of the medicine wheel, but it is a widely used metaphor which contains traditional teachings among First Nations groups in Canada. And a common thread between the variations is this ongoing interconnectedness and interrelatedness of all aspects of life and the need for balance among these different aspects. So it's a symbol of wholeness, which gives equal importance to the 4 directions. And the 4 directions of the medicine wheel that guided our workshop included the 4 aspects of life: emotional, intellectual, physical, and spiritual. So our collaborative strategies to engage with our patient partners in this first phase included a 2-day digital storytelling workshop led by Dr. Marlyn, Bennet, and myself, and 3 talking circles throughout the digital storytelling workshop, where we talked about the woman's perceptions of what knowledge needs to be developed to improve healthcare services. We heard about their experiences of breast cancer, and we also asked for their feedback on the actual digital storytelling workshop and what they would change or keep the same for a future research study. And to plan our workshop, we offered tobacco and received guidance from the First Nations elders, and we also consulted with leaders in Indigenous health research in our community. Then through connections at Cancer Care Manitoba and the University of Manitoba, we recruited 3 First Nations women with experiences of breast cancer to participate in the workshop. And we offered them honorariums to thank them for it.
Okay, so the objective, as Kendra was saying, about our digital storytelling workshop were to explore Indigenous women's meanings and conceptualizations behind their lived breast cancer experience. As Kendra mentioned, we held 3 talking circles. The questions that we had asked were first vetted through elders who reviewed our questions and then provided us with feedback. So these were the questions that we asked during those talking circles. So just to be clear, a talking circle is an Indigenous traditional method where participants gather in a circle and they take time to share uninterrupted what they're thinking and feeling, and to ensure that we do this to ensure that members are all heard. So a traditional sharing circle is a bit different. It is viewed as sacred, and some believe that it is inappropriate to record a sharing circle for research purposes. The talking circles are basically to foster relationships and trust and provide an opportunity for participants to share their perspectives on the issues emerging from creating and listening to the digital stories and their experiences of the workshop to inform our future study. Our days were full. We met for 2 days from 9 a.m. in the morning until 5 p.m. in the evening. We opened with instructions and an opening prayer according to the customs of the Indigenous communities of Manitoba. We offered the women a tobacco tie at the beginning as a culturally appropriate and respectful way of asking for women's assistance and support in doing this research. And in our communities, tobacco is sacred, and tobacco ties are made by taking a small pinch of ceremonial organic tobacco and placing it on a small square cloth and then forming a small tie sachet. And we place the tobacco between us and the women who were there, and specifically ask them to share their story and experience with us. And so all of the participants picked up the tobacco, and by picking up that tobacco, that meant that they were in agreement for participating in our study. We also held a purification, which is sometimes referred to as smudging, at the start of each day. And again, this is an Indigenous tradition that involves the burning of sacred medicines in a shell or a small bowl. And these medicines could be sweetgrass, sage, or cedar. And it is meant to cleanse a person and to cleanse the place of negative thoughts and to create a positive mindset. So on the first day, we introduced the participants to the methodology of digital storytelling. We provided them with a sample of a digital story. We shared my digital storytelling as my experience being a second generation of a survivor of residential school. And so after sharing this example, then the participants took some time to work on writing their stories about their experience of living with breast cancer. We asked them to consider embedding in their responses the questions that were asked during the talking circles. And we asked them to make sure that they did not write too long of a story. We asked them to keep their stories to 1 page or no more than 2 pages, otherwise it would end up in a very long video. We're of the mind that if the video is too long, it just might cause people to lose interest in their stories, and they have important things to share about what they went through. So once the participants wrote their stories, we then introduced them to the iPad app, iMovie. Kendra brought iPads for each of them to work on. We gave them some information about how a storyline works in the iMovie app. And this was an opportunity for participants to explore the app and to also explore the iPad and how the iPad and the app both work together. Then the participants had an opportunity to record themselves narrating their stories. They also took time to find pictures that matched their stories. And these pictures could be pictures that they already had, or these could be pictures that they pulled from the internet that really talked about the way that they were feeling. So they were given an option also to find music that fit the mood of the story they were going to share. On the second day, we held our second talking circle, and participants continued working and finalizing the videos until 3 p.m. And we supplied snacks for the morning break, but we also had more substantial food for the feast that was going to happen later on during the day. Then during the feast, the participants showed their videos, and we finished off the day with a final talking circle where we also got feedback from the participants that would help inform a future study. We distributed certificates, we paid out an honorarium to the participants, and then we closed with a prayer. And I also provided the participants with a rock that I had painted. So these are some of the pictures from the location where the digital storytelling workshop was conducted. So this first picture at the top here is the William Norrie Center, named after a mayor from the city of Winnipeg. This building is in the heart of the north end of Winnipeg, where there is a huge Indigenous and newcomer population. The other pic is from our feast on the last day of the workshop, and this is food from a restaurant in Winnipeg called Feast Cafe Bistro. And the owner is Krista Bruno Gunther, who is actually an Indigenous chef, and she actually was on the Food Chef Canada as one of the judges. As Kendra had indicated, although we do not have ethical permission to share the details of what we learned about First Nations women's experience of breast cancer in this patient engagement initiative, we can share that our conversations were profound and they provided deep insights into First Nations women's experience with breast cancer. And the women told us stories which illuminated the strengths that they drew upon and to find healing, and also the challenges and racism they experienced within the healthcare system. As well, the women provided critical advice for our future qualitative study and how to further adapt digital storytelling and picture work together. So there is this question here. Some people have asked me how I felt during my cancer experience, but no one had asked me to tell my story until now. So for many of these women, they were burdened with the experience of living with breast cancer, but not having the chance to unburden themselves by telling their story. And we were able to do this in the 2 days that we held this workshop. From our perspective, the workshop authentically engaged First Nation women with breast cancer as it was guided by the medicine wheel. And this medicine wheel attends to all aspects of life. The workshop did not just involve intellectual engagement, it involved the traditional Western. It also engaged women in connection with their emotions, spirituality, and the physical aspects of their lives. We attended to the intellectual aspects of life through engaging the intellectual elements of oral storytelling, writing a narrative, and developing technological skills on the iPad. In terms of the spiritual aspects, we incorporated prayers, we offered tobacco, we did smudging, the traditional medicines, and we met in a sacred round room at the William Morey Center. To attend to the physical, we provided delicious food and we held an Indigenous feast. We held a workshop, of course, at a meaningful location in the city for Indigenous people, and we gave each participant a gift of painted rock that I had painted. And to attend to the emotional, we offered each other emotional support in the talking circles, and we used the creative process of expressive arts, which provided an emotional language to express cancer experiences and perceptions. So by attending to the 4 aspects of life, we believe that the digital storytelling workshop facilitated a Debwewin journey. So the Debwewin journey, it's an ancient Anishinaabe way of knowing that connects one's circle of heart knowledge and circle of mind knowledge. It produces a Debwewin, which is really a personal and holistic truth that is rooted in one's heart. You have probably all heard of the saying, the longest journey is the one that you would take from your heart to your head or your head to your heart. This concept was created by Dr. Rieger, who wrote about the Debwewin journey and methodology, which she learned from Anishinaabe elders and traditional knowledge holders. And we were guided in its application as we carried out the digital storytelling workshop. So finding one's Debwewin truth enables one to speak from the heart, which is often lacking in patient engagement initiative. So this diagram depicts the Debwewin journey. It was created by Dr. Rieger. From her perspective, there are 2 circles of knowledge. There is the circle of the heart and the circle of the mind. And knowledge is located when we connect the 2. Knowledge of the mind or heart alone is viewed as incomplete knowledge, as intelligence is not seen as purely cerebral. The circle of the heart encompasses emotions and spirit, and the circle of the mind encompasses what we would typically think of as intellectual understandings. Drawing upon both and integrating them are important in finding and expressing one's personal truth, which is crucial to patient engagement and to qualitative research. The journey that everyone takes through this process will be different. No one's journey is the same. So the Debwewin journey results in personal and holistic understanding of the phenomenon. This subjective knowledge about one's own experience is what is needed in patient engagement. As opposed to observing the one true external reality, in patient engagement, we seek to understand our patient's personal experiences of health and illness and how multiple factors intersect to profoundly and often traumatically shape their experiences. The digital storytelling workshop allowed all of us to come to a holistic understanding which integrated both thoughts and emotions about First Nations women's experiences with breast cancer and of the actual workshop and provided insight into the intersecting factors influencing their experiences. So therefore, the digital storytelling workshop facilitated a Debwewin journey for all of us as we came to understand the participants' experiences in a way that connected their hearts and their minds. So we believe that this holistic understanding is key to meaningful patient engagement and to patients' personal truths being authentically expressed and heard in research process. So if you're interested in learning more about the Debwewin journey as a methodology, we would point you to the direction of Dr. Lynn's article of the same name. And this article provides an excellent example of the circle of heart and the circle of mind methodology. So after the patient engagement digital storytelling workshop, we have invited the participants to participate in a study. In this study, we are proposing a framework for respectful use of storytelling where we are co-creating this work with Indigenous and non-Indigenous scholars, Indigenous elders, patients, and administrators. Furthermore, digital storytelling for both Dr. Rieger and myself has led to other projects where we have embarked on digital storytelling and using it as a methodology. So we have been involved in training the trainer sessions with a First Nations child welfare agency who plan to use digital storytelling when they go into northern and remote communities to engage with families about their child welfare experiences. We have also partnered with Dr. Gordon Budahan, where we will be engaging with patients and elders to explore Indigenous lung cancer survivors' barriers to care through sharing circles and digital storytelling. Another project that we are engaged in is with Conrad Prince and Save the Children Canada, where we will be doing digital storytelling with Indigenous adolescents who have faced isolation and stress during COVID, where their mental health and well-being has been at risk. And we are hoping to use digital storytelling as a way to provide adolescents with a vehicle to positively engage socially and emotionally. And lastly, we are working with a project with Manitoba Advocates for Children and Youth, where we will be doing digital storytelling with male youth in care. This slide reflects on some of the lessons we have learned from doing the digital storytelling with Indigenous women. Digital storytelling is a catalyst for deep connection and sharing. It provided us with many insights, and we were able to authentically engage with Indigenous women who have experienced living with breast cancer. It was a healing, fun opportunity. It provided options for a different way of learning and knowing. It allowed for self-discovery, re-experiencing, and also lended to empowerment of not only the women who participated, but also for Kendra and myself to just realize how powerful digital storytelling can be when utilized in this way. And it also provides an opportunity for adhering to protocols from the Indigenous community. It provides safety and opportunities for place, recognition of place, and that meals were really key also to engaging with women, making sure that not only were we feeding them intellectually, but we're also feeding them physically as well. And it also provided an opportunity for us to again advise for future events. So we come to our final slide here, and I want to just say how pleased I am to be a part of this presentation with Kendra. And unfortunately, I can't be there in person. I am in the community of Shenandoah in northern Manitoba doing the Photo Voice project with the Indigenous youth up there. So thank you for listening to our presentation. I will now turn it over to Kendra, who will take questions on our behalf.
Okay, thank you so much for that presentation. So we are in the break time now, and the next session starts at 4:15. However, so please, if you need to take a break and then come back, that's, it's very understandable. If you have a few minutes and can hang around, I think Kendra's willing to stick around for a few minutes to answer any questions that people might have, as am I. So yeah, whatever you need to do, but please put a question in the chat box. So there's a question from Rochelle about just wondering, I may have missed it, what were the group sizes?
So in this project, it was a patient engagement project. And so it was a smaller group for digital storytelling. It was 3 women. But often in a digital storytelling workshop, you have anywhere between 5 and 10 people in the workshop. So in our next project, that's more of the size of what we're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
It's a balance because you want to also have a small enough group that you're able to create a feeling of safety and develop relationships. And if it gets too big, it's quite an emotionally intense process, what you work through as a group in 2 to 3 days. And I think Amanda did a really lovely job of exploring that. And so it takes a lot of thought and to create that environment. And so that's the only, I actually might not want to go above 8 people, I think, because of that.
Mhm. Kathleen, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. In your process of getting them to the place where they're going to do a story, did you sort of did some preemptive work as far as photos and, you know, and then limiting the photos or limiting, like, you know, where, like, because I can totally see how this can really just have all kinds of arms and legs and get away on you. So how did you, you know, rein that in and kind of keep it focused? Because I know when you're going through memory with elders and with people that are going through really hard stuff, it's, you know, with time constraints and things like that, how was that for you, for your team?
Thank you for bringing that up, Kathleen, because that was actually one of the, what we see as the limitation of our workshop. It was only a 2-day workshop, and next time we definitely have it in at least 3 days, because you're so right. Like, once the women got engaged into selecting photos, it just became this, like, they were completely like engaged with the process. Like, they were in that state of flow, and it felt like we were often having to move the process along. And so I think next time we want to create more space for that. One thing we did is we asked them to think about a story and photos that might represent aspects of that story beforehand, and to bring that to the workshop. So you can do some pre-work like that. But I do think that it's really important. We've learned from that experience. Marlyn often does a 5-day workshop, actually. We were worried about, like, the burden to our participants, and if they would, you know, if it would just, it seems 2 days seems like a lot to commit to, right? But they were all at the end of the workshop, they were just like, oh, we would have loved this to be 3 days. Like, they said the time just flew by. Like, it was like one of the most meaningful experiences of my life. And for the women as well, the feedback they gave us was just, they just, like, it felt like we developed such a great sense of community, and their engagement with selecting photos. And that's such an important part of the process, right? So, long answer to your question is some pre-work, giving enough space in the workshop. So I would say a 3-day workshop next time is what I would do. Yeah. And really close one-on-one work. Like, there was 2 of us and 3 women. So we really worked together to help keep that focus.
If you think you can tackle this in a minute or so, because I really don't want to take away from the other presenters who are starting at 4:15. But there was one last question about if you could talk about the training the trainers and what the vision is for that piece.
Sure. Okay. So, so what happened was, just a community member reached out to Marlyn and I. They had had some involvement in the workshop without giving too many details. And they were working for Child and Family Services, an Indigenous branch, and they were developing a lands-based camp in a northern community for families that were needing to spend some time together and have more support. And so she loved the idea of digital storytelling so much. She's like, I want to do this at this family lands-based camp. And so Marlyn and I conducted a digital storytelling workshop with that group, similar to what Amanda described, that where they went to a workshop to learn it. We did a digital storytelling workshop to train them how to do it, and they've taken it to other communities. It wasn't a research project or anything. It was just a community relationship, and it's just kind of turned into this beautiful thing. It's still ongoing. I talk to that person like on a regular basis.
Lovely. I wish we had so much more time. I want to thank you so much, and I hope everybody will join me in thanking Kendra and Marlyn for sharing and deepening our understanding of digital storytelling, such a powerful mode of knowledge, sharing and generation. And just, masicho to you for sharing that.
Thank you, Lyana, and thank you everybody for taking the time to listen about our work.
So next